is happening. It's like it's going all right. That's happening, then that means I can share the text. There. And mute myself because I don't want to hear myself. That goes there, that goes there. There. One more thing to move into place. Okay. All right, and at 12:01, that's not too bad a amount of time. Just make sure that that's still working over there. Yes, okay, good. All right, so good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining me either on YouTube or on Zoom, whichever is your preference. As I have said many times, but not quite recently, remember that this conversation about suffering is meant as part of our long-term study and building up of our resources. If you are in the midst of a crisis, by all means, contact me, or if you're not local, a rabbi near to you to discuss some of these issues in more detail. And don't take any of the things that we will be discussing, especially today, as being criticism of your own circumstances. Oftentimes, people will read the wrong passage at the wrong time, meaning it's the right passage for a different time, and come to erroneous conclusions. Oftentimes we can feel that the text is unnecessarily harsh on us or on others we know that are suffering. And please understand that, as we have said multiple times, especially with regards to the story of Job, none of the criticisms that are used in these texts are meant to dehumanize or to make any person feel like they deserve their suffering. They are meant to help us at different times, and everyone should do as much as they can to alleviate the suffering of themselves and others, and at all times. Something that is not always remembered. When too often, when people feel that there is an explanation or a deservedness, they will feel that therefore there is no need for a remedy. That is not the Jewish position. Even as we try to seek the causes of suffering, we are simultaneously seeking the remedies of that suffering. Now, last week we began our discussion of Rambam's analysis of suffering, or some of the suffering, found in his Moreh Nevuchim, his guide for the perplexed. The citation is again there at the top of the page, part 3, chapter 12. And we went through the first two categories of suffering that Rambam wanted us to understand. The first is that certain amounts of suffering, of pain, of problems will come as a necessary and unavoidable element of being a material creature. Since we have a body, in the philosophical sense, meaning not just this particular configuration, but we are a physical creature, the same way that a baseball has a body, we are subject to change. That change allows for all of the good and beautiful things we experience in this world. Indeed, that change is a necessary element for the reason that we exist in the first place. But that change also means that we are vulnerable. Anything that can change can break. That doesn't mean that we have to just accept those forms of suffering, and we should and must continue to use all of our resources to overcome those physical vulnerabilities, whether it be through better safety measures such as seatbelts and vaccines, or whether it be through curative treatments such as trauma centers, hospitals, and many other sources of remedy for physical ailments. So that was category number one. Category number two is the category of evils that somebody causes another person. This is somebody else has decided to swing their fist and it is contacted with your face. This is an unavoidable category, even though each individual instance can and should be avoided. That is to say, there will always be the potential for one person to cause harm to another, because that is what free will entails. The fact that we have choice to do good or evil is what allows us to live a morally significant life. And as such, the impact of the evil choices of others will always be to some extent in potential around us and in actual far too often. But he does remind us, and we discussed this in more detail last week, that as horrible as these situations are, and as much as we are shown these through our 24-hour attention economy, whatever you want to call it, modern world, the actual amount of direct and terrible evil caused by one person to another is relatively low as a proportion of the population. It's any is too much, but as a proportion of population and as a proportion of the time we spend on this world is very low. Most of us, after all, have not been in a fist fight probably today. Most of us have not been in a fist fight probably for at least a year or two or many more. Many people, in fact, I'd say the majority of people have never known what it's like to be punched in the face or to punch another person in the face. And that's okay. Remember, that was actually the lesson in Fight Club, in case you got that wrong. But stepping aside from pop culture, we recognize that free will necessitates that the potential for evil will mean that there is the potential for harm by evil people. It is up to us to both teach people to not do evil, as well as to put into place restraints that can prevent people from doing evil, and of course, to work to remedy any evil that someone chooses to do. Category 3 is where we're going to focus today. We didn't get time to do this properly, and as you can tell by the page count, this is going to take up the bulk of the rest of this section of Rambam's Guide for the Perplexed. And it is a doozy, which is to say, this is one of the most effective tools for reframing how we perceive problems in the world for ourselves. Now, as always, your mileage will vary and your situation will vary. Rambam, already by the fact that he's got 2 other categories, is admitting that third category is not going to explain every type of suffering that a person is enduring. This is not trying to say that everything falls into category 3. However, he does believe that it is one of the most prevalent sources for the feeling of evil. And as such, it becomes one of the areas where we have the most control over our remedy. When we are dealing with the fact that we are physical creatures, well, it takes a great deal of effort, both mental and physical, to try and prevent or remedy physical harm. The fact that there is free will and some people can and will choose to do evil is very hard to fix. We've been working at it. We are better. All the numbers from human history going back 10,000 years say that we're living in a better time with regards to the evil choices of others. It's just the impact of the few continues to be very noticed and well outsized because we've proportionally increased their capability of causing evil. However, part 3 is going to talk about evil that is constantly being felt, but doesn't have to be. And we don't need changes of massive societal or technological advance in order to avoid it. This is the part that is most within our control. And as such, we postponed it till today in order to go into it in more detail. So let's go through and see what we can learn from this section. The third class of evils comprises those which everyone causes to himself by his own action. Now, you might be thinking that this is just talking about hitting yourself in the head. As we're going to see, there's a deeper cause that Rambam is going to be exposing in this self-harm section. This is the largest class and is far more numerous than the second class, meaning the evil that is done to another person. This is probably feels a little counterintuitive. Most of us feel that we are more harmed by others than we are by ourselves, but that's why Rambam is going to unpack this with great care. It is especially of these evils that all men complain. Only a few men are found that do not sin against themselves by this kind of evil. Meaning, if you sit around and listen to somebody complaining, chances are that the bulk of the complaints they have can be traced back to this third category. Those that are afflicted with it are therefore justly blamed, in the words of the prophet. This has been by your means, taken from Malachi. The same expressed in the following passage. He that does it destroys his own soul, from the book of Proverbs. In reference to this kind of evil, Solomon says, the foolishness of man perverts his way, also from Proverbs. And in the following passage, he explains also that this kind of evil is man's own work. Lo, this only have I found, that God has made man upright, but they have thought out many inventions, from Ecclesiastes, also attributed to Solomon. And these inventions bring evil upon him. The same subject is referred to in Job. For affliction comes not forth of the dust, neither does trouble spring out of the ground. Now, these words are immediately followed by the explanation that man himself is the author of this class of evils, but man is born unto trouble. Now, this collection of verses are not meant to be exhaustive of all forms of evil and suffering in the world. He's already got two other categories that indicate that's not his intention. But he is saying this type of evil, this type of problem that we cause to ourselves is exceedingly prevalent. And it is so prevalent that the words of the Tanakh, of the Bible, go out of their way to try and explain so much of the problems that we face and that we complain about are self-inflicted. So we're going to really have to unpack this, because I'm sure many of you are shaking your head saying, I've done no such thing. Well, let's see his examples and how this gets put into practice. This class of evils originates in man's vices, such as excessive desire for eating, drinking, and passion, indulgence in these things in undue measure or in improper manner, or partaking of bad food. All right. Now, we're going to see that this is a much broader and deeper idea here. This is not Rambam just saying some people drink too much and then they get into a car crash. What he is talking about here is, in fact, the first element, rather than the examples, the excessive desire, that it comes from our will. It comes from what we would call our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination. Now, that is a topic that is going to get its own discussion after we finish this whole portion. So we're going to leave the source and the place that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, has within Jewish thinking and how it interacts with our world and causes suffering. We're going to leave that for another time. But understand that that's Rambam's focus here, is that it is our Yetzer Hara, our inclination, that is creating these problems. Now, first manifestation of that is that we actually enjoy too much of our eating, our drinking, or our passion, our licentiousness. And as he says, this would be an undue measure or improper manner, or just plain up wrong food. Now, that undue and improper are very important because, as we know, we do need to eat, we do need to drink, and we have nothing against the idea of physical pleasure within Judaism. But there are limits, there are rules, there are guidelines, there are ways to do it and ways that it should not be done. And what Rambam is saying is that the excessive desire leads us into those incorrect manifestations rather than allowing these things to be done within their proper measure. More on that when we talk about Yetzer Hara, but let Rambam continue. This course, meaning indulging these passions too much, brings diseases and afflictions upon body and soul alike. The suffering of the body in consequence of these evils are well known. Those of the soul are twofold. Before we get into the soul, let's just make sure we understand, because it may not be so well known, but when Rambam says a person who engages excessively in drinking has consequences of those evils on his body, well, it doesn't take too much effort for us to realize that he's talking about the various ways that excessive alcohol can cause huge damage to ourselves. Not only in the extreme cases of a person who will drive while drunk and get into an accident, but also in the constant degradation of the human body through the overconsumption of alcohol, which causes psoriasis of the liver and numerous other physical ailments. Likewise, one who engages in excessive eating in ways that are damaging to the body will have numerous comorbidities that will create a circumstance that will cause numerous other health problems. And of course, there are numerous other physical ailments that can come upon a person if they are engaged in licentious and uncautious intimacy with too many partners. All right, but the soul, well, that is something that we need a little more explanation of. How do these types of indulgences create evils of the soul? Well, first, such evils of the soul as are the necessary consequences of the changes in the body, insofar as the soul is a force residing in the body. It has therefore been said that the properties of the soul depend on the condition of the body. So Judaism believes that although the soul is a unique and an eternal element of our self, it is still within the body, and the body itself, the physicalness of the body, has an impact, has an influence on the state of the soul at any given time. When the body is happy, it is easier for the soul to be happy. When the body is damaged and hurt, it is easier for the soul to feel damaged and hurt. And as such, if we are engaged in activities which cause our body harm, then our soul is going to be in a worse position. And that is of significance. That is of great consequence. And we should never believe that no matter what we do to the body, the soul won't be impacted. Of course it will, which is one of the reasons why when we are doing a Mishaberach, a prayer for somebody in need of healing, we say refuat hanefesh or refuat haguf, that there should be a healing of the soul and a healing of the body, because they are intertwined, they are enmeshed within one another, and we should always recognize that there is a bidirectionality of the influence of the soul on the body and the body on the soul. All right, part two of the damages that this type of behavior causes to the soul. Secondly, the soul, when accustomed to superfluous things, acquires a strong habit of desiring things which are neither necessary for the preservation of the individual nor that of the species. This desire is without limit, whilst things which are necessary are few in number and restricted within certain limits. But what is superfluous is without end. For example, you desire to have your vessels, your plates, your cups of silver, but golden vessels are still better. Others have even vessels of sapphire, or perhaps they can be made of emerald or rubies, or any other substance that could be suggested. So what Rambam is saying here is that not only is there a direct consequence to the soul by the ill treatment of the body, but because we are indulging and giving in to those desires for more and more unnecessary things, our soul then becomes tuned towards those unnecessary things. It becomes driven to want more and more of them. And because those unnecessary things have no limit, it means the soul traps itself in a perpetual state of desire, of anxiety, and of feeling of want, of deprivation. Because if I want those gold plates and I can't have them, then I feel like evil is being done to me. But the origin of my want for those gold plates was by giving into my attitude of wanting more at all of things that are unnecessary. Now, we're going to get into that in a lot more detail, but I just want to make sure that that point is clear, that we have an absolute right and an absolute need to want things that we need. That for a person to say, I need food, I'm hungry, for a person to say, I am thirsty, I need some water or something to drink, that is not just okay, it is essential. A person should have those desires in order to sustain their body, for after all, the body is the vessel of the soul, and we need the body to be in good condition in order for the soul to continue its journey in this world and to continue to do what it has been called into the world to do. But when we get into the track of and satisfying my body with more and more and more things that are unnecessary, then we train our soul to start looking for those, and we are trapped then, because there is no way to actually satisfy that need. There is no way to ever completely quench that fire of want once we have begun to perpetuate it. There are, of course, ways to break that cycle and get out of it. It's not once you've started, it's going to dominate your destiny. This is not Star Wars. Instead, it is simply that without intervention, without a deliberate attempt to change that path, it is the natural and constant perpetuator of this feeling of dissatisfaction, of anxiety, and of suffering from our point of view. And Rambam is admitting that that suffering is real. This is not just, it's not a real suffering. You just want something you can't have. For the person who wants it, it absolutely feels real. And that means we need to find a way to unpack why we want these things and what we can do about it. So Rambam continues. Those who are ignorant and perverse in their thought, Rambam can be a little blunt, are constantly in trouble and pain because they cannot get as much of superfluous things as a certain other person possesses. Meaning, if you are the kind of person who has not taken the time to sit, to study, to reflect, to understand the nature of the world and the nature of the self and the nature of God, then you are most likely going to be stuck on the treadmill of wanting more than you have because you have seen other people who are enjoying these things. And as such, you are going to be, well, constantly in trouble and pain. You will constantly have problems. And he gives a few examples. They, as a rule, expose themselves to great dangers, for example, by sea voyage or service of kings, and all this for the purpose of obtaining that which is superfluous and not necessary. Especially in the classical world of 1,000 years ago, sea voyages were very dangerous. And I find that it's very interesting that he is still correct that serving a despot or tyrant is also fraught with peril, even if it also has the potential for great monetary reward. That much has not really changed. And he's recognizing here that this desire of wanting more leads people to take risks because the risk feels worth it for the thing that they have decided, or they now feel that they want so greatly. After all, we would take great risk in order to feed ourselves. And if we have created our desire for unnecessary things to be as great as our desire for basic food or even more, then we will risk great harm to ourselves, thinking that we are doing something necessary when in fact it is not. When they thus meet with the consequences of the course which they adopt, they complain of the decrees and judgments of God. So you get caught by pirates because you're out trying to make a fortune on the high seas. Then it's like, God, why did you curse me like this? God, why did you allow the pirates to take my ship? Again, forgetting category 2, that other people are going to have the right to choose evil, and that you chose to put yourself in this situation because you felt you needed to, when in fact you did not. And yet, so many of us, when we are faced with these consequences of our decisions, poorly made as they were, we will blame the unfairness of God and the unfairness of God's world. They begin to blame the time and wonder at the want of justice in its changes, that it has not enabled them to acquire great riches with which they could buy large quantities of wine for the purpose of making themselves drunk, and numerous concubines adorned with various kinds of ornaments of gold, embroidery, and jewels, for the purpose of driving themselves to voluptuousness beyond their capacities, as if the whole universe existed exclusively for the purpose of giving pleasure to these low people. So it's a beautiful encapsulation of the consumer society that we find ourselves now, and was unfortunately still true 1,000 years ago, even though they lacked many of the luxuries that we take for granted. Which is to say that many people will drive themselves to the point of breaking or past, and harm themselves greatly or others in their pursuit of these riches, only to then turn and use those riches for things which do harm to themselves, only to turn around and use what they have attained through their horrible endeavors to provide a momentary satiation of the desires that, as we have established, are technically without end, meaning that the desire will only come back stronger now that you have fed it to that degree. That once you have given into that appetite and then met it, that the appetite will come back stronger, the same way that somebody who is taking an addictive substance will find that after that first satisfaction of usage, that they will want to have more and more and more to chase that same feeling of satisfaction, which can never be obtained by just having what you currently have. And that in the process of continuing to increase, we will far exceed our capacity to not only enjoy, but to even endure, which will lead to greater body and physical and psychic and social harm, psychic and soulful harm. Trying to get my English in line. This continues rampant within our own time of people who complained of their lack of things that, were they to have them, would only create more need for greater things and worse outcomes for themselves were they to be enjoying them. This isn't to say that a certain degree of wealth and comfort and other things are wrong. This is not advocating that we live in poverty in a cave as hermits. It is saying that when we direct our lives and we organize our entire purpose around the attainment of these types of things, that we are playing a fool's game. There is no way to ever properly satisfy it, and in that pursuit, we will harm ourselves. We'll continue on this theme as we go through. The error of the ignorant goes so far as to say that God's power is insufficient because he has given this universe the properties which they imagine causes these great evils, and which do not help all evil-disposed persons to obtain the evil which they seek, and to bring their evil souls to the aim of their desires, though these, as we have shown, are really without limit. And this, I think, for Rambam is one of the great chutzpahdik. It's the audacity of people in this position. Is not only are they setting themselves on this course of self-destruction and ruin, often taking many others along the way, but they are also going to engage in incredible acts of complaint and anger and vehement denunciation of God, because the world doesn't cater to their whim the way they want. That somehow the world is wrong. Somehow God made the universe bad because they don't have as many concubines as they think they deserve. And therefore, God is terrible, God is weak, God is insignificant, and just let me keep doing what I'm doing, and I will find no limit to my behavior because I've already denied God in the process of complaining that I haven't gotten everything I want so far, even though technically now what I want will always be increasing. So it's impossible for me to ever get everything I want. All right, just pause there and let that sink in. I'm sure that all of us could think of examples of many people we have seen, either in the media world or perhaps even in our own sphere, who seem to be constantly chasing the next thing, the next experience, the next item that they think with that will make me happy. If I get that car, if I get that upgraded car, if I get that house, if I get that bigger house in the fancier neighborhood with the fancier amenities, if I get the corner office, if I get the corner office on the higher floor, if I have that kind of girlfriend, boyfriend, then I know I will be happy. Then I will be able to satiate the great desires within me, and then I will know what it is to be content. And from the outside, we can all look at that and, chuckle sometimes and shake our heads slowly. But we have to recognize that on a small scale, many of us engage in this as well. We might deny it. We might think that everything we want is actually needed. But as we're going to see in the next few sections, Rambam is going to try and remind all of us that what we actually need is far less than what any of us ever admit that we want. So let's go ahead and continue with that reflection. The virtuous and wise, however, see and comprehend the wisdom of God displayed in the universe. Thus David said, all the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth unto those who keep his covenant and his testimonies. For those who observe the nature of the universe and commandments of the law and know their purpose, see clearly God's mercy and truth in everything. They seek, therefore, that which the Creator intended to be the aim of man, that is to say, comprehension. So Rambam was very much an advocate that the purpose of our creation, the reason that we exist at all, is not to fill a garage or to fill a bank account, but the reason that we exist at all is so that we can use our soul and mind to understand both this world, but most importantly, through this world and through revelation, understanding God, to come through that concept of comprehension to a higher level of appreciation of all of existence. That's the point. And if that's the point, then we have to restructure our priorities. And as you can imagine, they've got nothing to do with filling the bank account. Instead, forced by the claims of the body, they seek also that which is necessary for the preservation of the body, bread to eat and garment to clothe. And this is very little, but they seek nothing superfluous. With very slight exertion, man can obtain it, so long as he is contented with that which is indispensable. So if you understand that the true purpose of living is in order to be able to understand, then once you have met the basic necessities, roof over your head, clothes over your body, food in the pantry, then you're good. And to drive yourself to rack and ruin to pursue more, well, how will that aid this process, if not run counter to it? But it provides no benefit. Once a person has enough, they have enough. And to want in excess of enough, well, is going to take you away from the proper purpose of your focus in any case. Doesn't mean that it's wrong that if you have more than enough because of other reasons, that's perfectly fine. Oftentimes, the bounties will come that are very pleasant and wonderful. But if we see attaining more and more as the purpose of our existence, then we are driving ourselves away from the true purpose of why we are here in the first place. So, what does he round out by saying? All the difficulties and troubles we meet in this respect are due to the desire of superfluous things. When we seek unnecessary things, we have difficulty even in finding that which is indispensable. For the more we desire to have that which is superfluous, the more we meet with difficulties. Our strength and possessions are spent in unnecessary things and are wanting when required for that which is necessary. So it may sound a little bit far-fetched that people will spend so much time and effort trying to obtain things which are unnecessary that they neglect the things that are necessary. But we have all seen that. All of us have met at least one person, if not many more, that will work themselves to the bone and to an early grave while trying to obtain a larger financial payoff. Well, they have literally spent their life as currency in order to gain more numbers in a bank account. And in the time, and in the fullness of time, their very body did not get that which it needed: rest, relaxation, experiences which help strengthen and build up our body to live longer and in better condition, because they were so consumed with trying to add those extra zeros. Well, they have burnt themselves to the ground to obtain something which is totally unnecessary. Now, obviously, there are those who have had to work very hard just to get the minimum, and that this is no criticism of them. If somebody is working 2 jobs just to put a roof over their head and food on the table, and they're barely getting any sleep, then we absolutely should lament the conditions of our society that push them to that extreme, but we don't need to blame them individually for those problems. But for somebody who has enough, to pursue more at the expense of what they have and at the expense of fulfilling their purpose on this planet, then Rambam's criticism hits very hard. Additionally, how many of us have limited those true experiences that we are meant to have deprived ourselves of the time, the company, the closeness of family and friends, deprived ourselves of those moments of quiet reflection or of engagement in study or understanding of this world, or have limited our ability or the amount that we would be willing to devote ourselves to the pursuit of a talent, of an art, or of some other form of achievement that allows us to ennoble ourselves and ennoble this world. And we limit all of those things because we want more of things that are fundamentally unnecessary. Now, let's take that concept of necessity, and Rambam will bring to our attention a beautiful insight into how we can truly see God's wisdom in the creation of the world. Observe how nature proves the correctness of this assertion. The more necessary a thing is for living beings, the more easily it is found and the cheaper it is. The less necessary it is, the rarer and dearer it is. For example, air, water, and food are indispensable to man. Air is the most necessary, for if a man is without air a short time, he dies, while he can be without water a day or two. And what do we find? Air is undoubtedly found more easily and cheaper than water. We need air the most, and therefore God created a world where air would be constantly around us, surrounding us, and if not, we would immediately recognize the crisis and try to remedy it. Water is more necessary than food. For some people can be 4 or 5 days without food, provided they have water. And water also exists in every country, that's usually inhabited, in larger quantities than food, and is also cheaper. The same proportion can be noticed in the different kinds of food. That which is more necessary in a certain place exists there in larger quantities and is cheaper than that which is less necessary. No intelligent person, I think, considers musk, amber, rubies, and emeralds as very necessary for man, except as medicines in some of the ideas of the ancient world. And they, as well as other like substances, can be replaced for this purpose by herbs and minerals. So he's drawing our attention that if we just look at the world around us, we can recognize that it was structured to provide us with everything we needed in abundance. And the things that we don't need, yes, are rarer. And due to the perversion of the economy and supply and demand and the way that we will often celebrate novelty, we have come to put a higher value on those things which are rarer rather than those things which are actually needed. Now, his assertion, even in this non-agrarian society that most of us live in, that the more necessary something is, the more available and the cheaper it is, remains true. You can supply yourself water through the tap from most municipal water supplies very cheaply, and have enough water to not only drink, but to bathe and to luxuriate in ways that our ancestors would have found just staggering. And likewise, food. If you walk into a supermarket and you look at what foods provide the most calories for the least amount of money, the most nutrition for the least amount of money, it's not hard to recognize that everything Rambam is saying is true. Compare the price of flour in a bag, which can be mixed with that water that is almost free, and provide a quite nutritious bread with just a little bit of time and labor. Compare that to the price of a Twinkie as what you're getting ounce for ounce in terms of nutrition and value and benefit for your body. The more processed something is, the more expensive it is. And very often there is a rapidly diminishing rate of return on how good it might be for yourself. And as such, we may find ourselves easily tempted and easily attracted to those things which have had greater amounts of sugar and of salt and of fat and other things which are less needed by the body, we may find ourselves attracted and even almost addicted to some of these things. But if we stop and reflect, the actual needs we have are minimal, and they are quite easily met with a minimum amount of effort for most of us. Now, when our society is not allowing a minimum amount of effort to meet those basic needs, there is a fundamental problem, because usually it means there is a perversion of the order in which God had created the world. If God created the world so that the minimum needs of a human being could be met with minimal effort, then if we find that some have monopolized or profiteered off of those necessities, then we have a societal issue, not a structure of the world issue, not a godly issue. And as such, it would need to be remedied and addressed. But for ourselves in our own reflection, to simply sit and say, look, what do I actually need? And how hard would it be for me to get that? And then everything after that can be a blessing, but it doesn't have to be my passion. It doesn't have to be my reason for living. It doesn't have to drive me to risk and to self harm or to hurting of others. It allows us to rebalance that sense of, where am I actually suffering? What is actually truly painful to me? Is it my lack of a Maserati and Ferrari in my garage that's truly causing me to feel discomfort? And if so, can I abandon that desire? Can I recognize that my needs are met with something far humbler than anything like that? And then if I still find that there is something missing and lacking, rather than trying to fill it with an object that has a price tag on it, then I may need to find a different way, a different comprehension of myself, this world, of God, of my community, my family, my friends. All of that will find much greater satisfaction, and in a way that doesn't cause that self-destructive behavior. Rambam is trying to put us back into balance with the balance that God created in this world, specifically so that humans would be able to thrive in a way that would feed that underlying purpose of ourselves. And that purpose, again, is not to have more zeros in the bank account. Rambam continues, so we are drawing to the conclusion of his point. This shows the kindness of God to his creatures, even to us weak beings. His righteousness and justice as regards all animals are well known. For in the transient world, there is among the various kinds of animals no individual being distinguished from the rest of the same species by a peculiar property or an additional limb, meaning most animals are pretty much like one another. On the contrary, all physical, psychical, and vital forces and organs that are possessed by one individual are found also in the other individuals. If anyone is somehow different, it is by accident, in consequence of some exception, and not by a natural property. It is also a rare occurrence. Yes, there are mutations, there are accidents, there are exceptions within every species and group, but those exceptions are, by definition, exceptions. And we shouldn't see them as being part of the natural property of that group. There is no difference between individuals of a species in the due course of nature. The difference originates in the various disposition of their substances, meaning how they are sort of composed at any given time. This is the necessary consequence of the nature of the substance of that species. The nature of the species is not more favorable to one individual than the other. Now, it's not exactly transparent, because Rambam is speaking sort of in, 1,000-year-old language of what we think of humans. But to put it into modern language, humans are humans, and humans need the same things. We need food, we need water, we need air. We need protection from the elements and from any natural challenges and dangers. And we need family, we need society, we need community. Our needs are all roughly the same individually. There's no one person who really, really, really needs diamonds, that's actually part of their personal nature. It may feel that way to that person, but they're not actually made by their nature exceptionally different than the rest of us, that for them diamonds are as food for the rest. No, we're all basically the same and have basically the same needs. Slightly different proportions, whether we are tall or short or old or young. Absolutely, there are some variations, but the basics are universal to all of us. And so we cannot excuse our excesses as though they are because of our own peculiar needs that are somehow innate within us as an individual. God made humans as humans to have human needs and to be able to thrive as humans will. Anything else that we are driving ourselves to ruin for is of our own invention. It is not because we were made that way. As he continues, it is no wrong or injustice that one has many bags of finest myrrh and garments embroidered with gold, while another has not those things, which are not necessary for our maintenance. He who has them has not thereby obtained control over anything that could be an essential addition to his nature, but has only obtained something illusory or deceptive. The other, who does not possess that which is not wanted for his maintenance, does not miss anything indispensable. As we see in the story of the manna, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every person according to his eating. This is the rule at all times and in all places. No notice should be taken of exceptional cases, as we have explained. So the fact that somebody has more doesn't mean I actually am suffering, because I don't need what they have. And what they have is illusory and temporary, because it doesn't actually satisfy their nature. It may satisfy their current craving, but it's only going to create greater craving for more, which is not exactly something to be jealous of. But what I do have, if sufficient to meet my needs, is enough to complete me. Everything beyond that is fine, nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't have to be sought. It doesn't have to be pursued, and it doesn't have to be lamented when we don't have it. When we see somebody with finer things in life than us, we must recognize that those fine things don't meet any need of their nature. It doesn't fill any hole that was created within us by God. Every time we finish eating something that wasn't one of the special species for which there is a particular blessing, we say a blessing known as Borei Nefashot, where we thank God for creating lack within us that can then be satisfied through what we have just eaten. Well, there are only so many things that we actually lack, that we need externally, whether it be food, air, and water, or some of the more transient psychological things that we need from companionship and fulfillment within our life. But those fulfillments that we pursue are not merely more or rarer or more expensive items. These are things that come through that comprehension that Rambam spoke earlier, of that appreciation, understanding, that bending of ourselves into this world in a way that has nothing to do with what we have obtained in our hands. As Rambam said, we obtain control over nothing that benefits us by putting on fancier clothes. What good does that do to my true purpose? Yes, it may earn you more status within certain circles, but we're not here in our very short lives just to be able to get more jealous looks from other people who will simply buy something even nicer next time to outdo me on the red carpet at the next event. This is the purpose of our life. This is a benefit to be constantly engaged in that kind of struggle. What actual good does that bring to me? For all of the billions I might obtain, for all of the accolades I might get from others that are jealous of my status within my field or social circles, I will still turn to dust, as our study of Ecclesiastes reminded us. And I will have nothing to show for it other than a life that was spent in pursuit of that which was vain, that which was nothing, that which didn't help me at all. We have to fight against that persistent desire, against that constant nattering voice against us, whether it is from inside or out, saying you need more in order to be more. You have already been created as the finest creature in all of God's existence. You don't need other things, random rocks from the ground or fabrics that have been woven around you in order to be greater than you already are. And when we pursue them, we become less than we could have been. When we feel that we are lacking because we don't have them, then we become worse off than if we recognize that we don't need them in the first place. And worst of all, when we warp our lives in pursuit of all of these other things, we cause such harm to ourselves and others that it becomes a mockery of what our existence was meant to be. As Rambam concludes, in these two ways, you will see that the mercy of God toward his creatures, how he has provided that which is required in proper proportions and treated all individual beings of the same species with perfect equality. In accordance with this correct reflection, the chief of the wise men says, all his ways are judgment, from the Torah, from Moses. David likewise says, all the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth. He also says expressly, the Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies over all his, and his tender mercies are over all his works. Taken from Psalm 145, which is the core section of the reading that we call Ashrei, that we recite multiple times every day for exactly this moment of reflection. For it is an act of great and perfect goodness that he gave us existence, and the creation of the controlling faculty in animals is a proof of his mercy towards them, as has been shown by us. All right, so we're going to leave that for today. Next time we come together, as I promised, we're going to be discussing the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. Because if, as Rambam said, much of the suffering that we experience in this world is because of this inclination, then where does it come from? Why do we have it? How do we get rid of it? Becomes essential in avoiding this persistent form of our feeling of pain and misery. So with that in mind, we will look forward to next week and our continued discussion. And thank you all for taking your time out today to try to comprehend what Rambam is saying, to try and orient yourself in life in a way that can minimize the pain you might feel, and God willing, the pain that any of us might cause someone else. Take care and be well.